the Chief Financial Officer for Carson City, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the Carson City's first annual budget open house. I'll be presenting an overview of the budget process and the proposed fiscal 17 budget. And afterwards, the departments will be out in the lobby of the community center. They will have presentations highlighting their budgets and the different functions that they perform. We also have comment forms at each of the stations for you to fill out and turn in before the end of the open house. So before I begin, I'd like to introduce the Mayor of Carson City, Bob Kroll.
Well, good evening, everyone. For our second budget meeting of the day, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time and interest to look at the budget, and thank you for your participation in our community. It means a great deal to the entire board. We will be going through the budget sort of like you are tonight, Thursday, at the Board of Supervisors meeting. At that meeting, the staff will have compiled all your questions, comments, and suggestions that they get from you tonight and that we've had from earlier today, so that we can have those with us as we go through the budget. It'll be it's exact same budget, same process that you're seeing tonight. So we want to encourage you to ask questions, look at what's going on, and share your concerns with us, share it with the staff, so that we can have those in front of us on Thursday. Again, on behalf of a grateful community and your Board of Supervisors, thanks for your interest in your community, and thanks for your interest in how we spend our taxpayer money. Thank you very much.
All right, to start off with, I'm going to go over the budget development process. At the February 18th board meeting, staff presented the assumptions that we would use in preparing the fiscal year 17 budget. And at that meeting, staff was also directed to build the base budget based on a property tax rate of $3.52 per $100 of assessed valuation. Also in February, base budget projections were developed by the Finance Department and sent to departments for their review. In February and March, capital requests were reviewed and ranked by the Capital Improvement Program Committee, and the departments presented their supplemental requests to the Internal Finance Committee. On March 17th, staff provided an update and status report on the general fund budget to the board. Tonight, April 4th, is our budget open house. And on Thursday, the proposed FY17 budget will be presented to the Board of Supervisors for discussion and possible direction in preparing the final budget. On May 5th, we'll be presenting the fiscal 17 capital improvement program and supplemental requests. And then on May 19th, the board will adopt the final budget, which is due to the Department of Taxation by June 1st. So the city has 33 budgeted funds, and they're broken out into two different types. Governmental fund types, which include the general fund, special revenue funds, debt service funds, and proprietary funds, which include enterprise funds and internal service funds. First, we'll start off with the big picture. The next two charts include all budgeted funds of the city. So total, this is citywide revenues. Total budgeted revenues are $138.2 million. The biggest piece of the pie are the intergovernmental resources, which are in purple at 23%, which include the state consolidated tax distribution, which is by far the largest source at $25.6 million. It also includes federal, state, and local grants, and state motor vehicle fuel tax. We broke the charges for services down into three different sections. The largest one at 22% are the enterprise funds. This includes the water and sewer funds, which make up most of this revenue for a total of over $27 million. The remaining enterprise funds make up approximately $5 million. The next charges for services are the internal service funds, and these are charges to other city departments, employees, and retirees to offset the costs of various centralized services such as group medical, workers' comp, and fleet maintenance. The charges for services at the bottom at 8% are the governmental fund charges for services, and these include the landfill, internal service charge revenue to the general fund, culture and recreation fees, and health department charges. The property tax in the blue at 17% includes the general fund, which is $22.6 million, and other voter-approved levies like for the senior center, and NRS allowed tax levies like the capital projects and the indigent funds. The other taxes in red, the 8%, are made up of the county option motor vehicle fuel and the sales and use taxes. This includes the RTC 9-cent fuel tax, the quality of life and street maintenance 1/4% sales tax, and the V&T and the infrastructure 1/8% sales tax. Licenses and permits at 5% include franchise fees, with the largest being from Southwest Gas and Nevada Energy. Now on to the citywide expenses. Total expenditure budget for the city is $136.7 million, with public safety being the largest piece at $37 million. That's the green on the top, the 25.5%. This includes fire, sheriff, and the 911 surcharge fund and other public safety grants. The next largest is the general government, which includes all city hall departments, internal service funds, and these are estimated at $29.5 million. The utility enterprises, down in the orange, they include the water, sewer, and stormwater drainage funds for a total of $23 million. So now I'm going to go through some of the individual funds in more detail. So the general fund is the chief operating fund of the city and also provides resources to fund capital projects, extraordinary maintenance, and debt service. General fund revenues. We're very conservative in developing the revenue projections for FY17. Total general fund revenues are only projected to increase 1.1%. Property taxes and licenses and permits are projected to increase by just 1%. The licenses and permits include the franchise fee for gas and electric, telecommunications, and the video services and sanitation. And this category also includes business licenses and gaming licenses. Consolidated tax revenues, we're projecting an increase of 4%, and charges for services, a slight decrease at 0.8%. The decrease in charges for services is due to a decrease in the internal service charge revenue to the general fund, paid for from other funds of the city. This slide shows the general fund revenues by source for the last 10 years. And as you can see, we're pretty consistent from year to year with property tax and consolidated tax. That's the gold and the dark green. And for fiscal 17, property tax and C-tax make up 71% of general fund revenues. So taking a closer look at the city's property tax rate, this shows the rates since fiscal 12. The city operating rate is in gold, and that's the portion that goes to the general fund. In fiscal 13, the city decided to raise the operating rate by 47 cents for a total rate of $3.66. The top section of that bar for fiscal 13 is, you'll see the districts, which include the Sierra Forest Fire Protection District, which was dissolved at the end of 2013, and we eliminated that tax rate after that. That's why it goes from 366 down to 356. And then in fiscal 15 and 16, the board lowered the tax rate by 2 cents each year. And for fiscal 17, the board directed staff to maintain the current tax rate at $3.52. So this slide shows the fiscal 17 countywide proposed tax rates. And I highlighted some of our closest neighbors, and as you can see, Carson City is less than Douglas, Lyon, and Washoe by 14 cents, and we're actually one of the lowest property tax rates in the state. So this slide, the green bars are the assessed valuation, and the line represents property tax revenues for the general fund. So due to the effects of the property tax enacted in 2005 and the resulting abatement, the property taxes continued to increase, although assessed values were decreasing from fiscal 9 through fiscal 12. Just to give you an idea of the effect of the abatement, in fiscal 9, the city's general fund had over $13 million in abatement. So almost half of the property tax calculation for that year was abated. The spike in revenues that you see for fiscal 13 is due to the increase in the operating rate of 47 cents. So as you can see, the assessed values from fiscal 14 are increasing, with the property tax revenues also increasing, but at a lower percentage. The property tax caps for fiscal 16 were 3% for residential and 3.2% for commercial property. The property tax cap formula is a pretty difficult calculation. It's a two-step process, and in determining the cap for fiscal 17, an unusually low change in the consumer price index and a negative 10-year average change in assessed value resulted in a property tax cap of only 0.2%. This was a hit of about $372,000 to the general fund. And we're expecting that this low cap will likely continue as the 10-year average change in assessed value continues to be negative due to the declines in assessed value from fiscal 11 through fiscal 14. So the largest source of revenue in the general fund is the consolidated tax. The monthly consolidated tax distribution received from the state includes cigarette tax, liquor tax, the government services tax, real property transfer tax, and the two sales taxes, the basic city-county relief tax and the supplemental city-county relief tax. So of the $25.6 million projected for fiscal 17, the sales taxes, the BCCRT and SCCRT, make up $22.5 million, or 88% of this revenue. So this gives you a little history on the consolidated tax. It's showing strong growth in the last few years. We're almost back to the peak levels of $26.8 million reached in 2006. Fiscal 15 had an increase of 10.9 over the prior year. For fiscal 16, we're projecting a 7% increase, and with 7 months worth of data in for the fiscal year, we're at 8.3% over the prior year. And then finally for fiscal 17, we're estimating a 4% increase. So this slide shows the taxable sales by month for the last 3 years. The green column is calendar year 2015, and as you can see, we realized increases over the prior year in every month in 2015. So on to general fund expenditures. By far the largest portion of the expenditures are public safety, which includes fire, sheriff, juvenile detention, juvenile probation, and alternative sentencing. The general government comes in at about half as much, and these departments include City Hall, such as HR, IT, finance, the assessor, treasurer, the DA. And the general fund expenditures for fiscal 17 are relatively flat when compared to fiscal 16, showing a slight decrease of 0.5%. Here's a historical view of general fund expenditures by the different functions. We're pretty consistent from year to year with public safety in the light green and the general government in the gold. So this chart shows general fund expenditures broken up by categories. Salaries and benefits make up 75.6% of the general fund expenditures. The city currently maintains 10 separate employee agreements and contracts, and the fiscal 17 budget was prepared in accordance with the provisions of these contracts. The remaining amount in the general fund are services and supplies, and these expenses have not increased much since we had done significant cuts back in fiscal year 2011. So this shows you the general fund employees, or FTEs. So you can see from fiscal 7 to fiscal 17, employees have dropped by 81, with only minor increases since fiscal year 11. And just like general fund expenditures, public safety in the white makes up 50% of general fund employees. So this shows the total picture of the general fund in a condensed version. The city's current financial policy is to maintain ending fund balance at 5%, with a goal of 8.3% as an operating reserve in the general fund. As identified in this slide, budgeted ending fund balance for 17 is 7.26% of expenditures. This is a 41% increase over the fiscal 16 budgeted ending fund balance, which was 5.15% of expenditures. In fiscal 17, we budgeted a contingency of $500,000 and a $100,000 transfer to the extraordinary maintenance fund. But based on the city's financial policy priority to increase general fund reserves, no additional capital funding was allocated from the general fund in fiscal 17. So this slide shows general fund operating revenues versus operating expenditures. And as you can see, the revenues exceed the expenses for the fiscal 13 through 15 actuals and the 16 through 21 projections. And the difference between the operating revenues and expenses are used for capital improvements, extraordinary maintenance, debt service, or to increase the fund balance reserves. This is a general fund long-term analysis. So each year when we're preparing the budget, we also do a 5-year projection to ensure that we can cover the ongoing costs of the general fund. The revenue projections are very conservative for 18 through 21. We projected a 4% increases in consolidated tax, 2% increase in property tax for fiscal 18, and 3% for fiscal 19 through 21, and just 1 to 3% increases for all other revenues. We budgeted salaries according to the provisions of the employee contracts, and a 7.5% increase in group medical. And as you can see, in each year, the fund balance dollars are increasing. So as you can see, this scenario shows very little funding for capital, decreasing the ending fund balance percentage by 1% down to 6.26 would provide approximately $650,000 for capital or operating budget supplemental requests. So our best case scenario for supplemental request and capital funding would be if the consolidated tax came in at 10% for fiscal 16 over the prior year. In the tentative budget, we just used a 7% increase and then 4% for the subsequent years. So this additional revenue would allow us to reach our goal of 8.3% ending fund balance and fund $820,000 in capital and supplemental requests for fiscal 17. We decided to delay the presentation on the capital improvement program and supplemental requests until the May 5th board meeting in order to obtain additional information on the fiscal 16 revenues. So the next type of funds that the city budgets are special revenue funds. They are used to account for and report the proceeds of specific revenue sources such as property taxes, fuel taxes, sales taxes, state and federal grants that are legally restricted to expenditure for specified purposes. The city currently has 18 special revenue funds. I'm going to go over some of the more significant funds in a little bit more detail. The first one is the Quality of Life Fund, which is used to account for the 0.25% sales tax override for the Question 18 Quality of Life Initiative. In this fund, we projected a 4% increase in sales tax for fiscal 17. And probably the largest project paid for from the Quality of Life Fund was the new Multipurpose Athletic Center, or the MAC, which was completed in January of this year. The fiscal 17 budget includes $239,000 for the aquatic facility roof, $200,000 for open space management and maintenance, $379,000 for open space salaries and benefits, and $120,000 payment to the Boys and Girls Club. The next fund is the Infrastructure Fund, which is used to account for the 8% sales tax to fund infrastructure projects as identified in the city's plan of expenditure. This fund is used to account for the bonds issued for the various projects funded by the sales tax, including the new MAC, the animal shelter, and the various corridor improvement projects throughout the city, including the downtown. The Regional Transportation Fund is used to account for the 9 cents per gallon county option fuel tax to be used for street and highway construction and maintenance. We assumed a 1% increase in the fuel tax for fiscal 17 to $3.4 million. $1.6 million is budgeted for debt service and $1.45 million for capital projects. Next is the Street Maintenance Fund, which is used to account for all street maintenance activities, funded by 5.35 cents per gallon state fuel taxes, a 1 cent county option fuel tax, and a 0.25% sales tax. Again, we assumed a 1% increase in fuel taxes and a 4% increase in the sales taxes for fiscal 17. So total revenue is a little over $4 million in this fund. Approximately $2 million is budgeted for salaries and benefits, and a little over $500,000 for capital projects and street and sidewalk improvements. Over $2 million, if you look to fiscal 16, over $2 million was budgeted for street and sidewalk improvements, and any amounts unspent at the end of this fiscal year will be rolled over to the next year. Next, we have the debt service funds, which are used to account for and report governmental financial resources that are restricted, committed, or assigned to the repayment of debt. This category does not include the debt service for enterprise funds. The debt transactions associated with those funds are accounted for in their individual funds. So in August of 2015, you'll see under fiscal 16 estimated the proceeds of refunding bonds and the payment to the refunding escrow. The city refinanced $21.6 million in bonds, which resulted in debt service savings of approximately $2.3 million. This slide shows the general fund debt service as a percentage of general fund expenditures. And as you can see in 16 and 17, it's expected to only be 4.4% of general fund expenditures. Next is the enterprise funds, which are used to account for operations that are financed and operated in a similar manner to private business and are financed primarily through user charges. The city has 6 enterprise funds: ambulance, sewer, water, cemetery, building, and stormwater drainage. The ambulance fund is used to account for the operations of the ambulance service provided by the Carson City Fire Department. In this fund, revenues have increased significantly since fiscal 2014, resulting in net income of $265,000 in fiscal 15. This increased revenue allowed us to budget $130,000 for capital in fiscal 16 and decrease the subsidy from the general fund from an original budget of $500,000 in fiscal 16 down to $400,000 and then down again to $350,000 in fiscal 17. We're pretty conservative in projecting revenues for 16 and 17, but looking at year-to-date receipts, we could be looking at an extra $250,000 in revenues. So this could be used for much-needed capital or to decrease the subsidy from the general fund. The Utility Financial Oversight Committee. So the purpose of this committee is to provide the board with recommendations regarding continuing compliance with adopted utility financial policies in preparation of their annual budgets. So tentative fiscal 17 budgets for water, sewer, and stormwater drainage were presented to this committee on March 15th. So the water utility includes for fiscal 17 an increase of 6.5%. The increase in rates is necessary to fund debt service for equipment upgrades, the regional water project, and various maintenance projects. This is year 4 of a 5-year structure phase-in approach approved by the board in 2013 to fund operating and maintenance expenses, debt service, capital improvements, capital reserves, and system reinvestment. This budget also reflects no increase in employees for fiscal 17. Next is the sewer fund. This fund includes a 15% increase in rates effective July 1st. This increase in rates is necessary to fund debt service for equipment upgrades, sewer line replacement and rehabilitation, and the water resource recovery facility rehabilitation. This budget also includes no increase in employees. So the last type of funds that I'll talk about are the internal service funds, which are used to allocate the cost of providing certain centralized services. Typically, the customers of these funds are other funds and departments within the city. The internal service funds are group medical, workers' compensation, insurance, and fleet management. So the group medical fund is used to account for the funds collected from city departments, employees, and retirements to provide health benefits. We assumed a 5% increase in premiums for group health insurance for fiscal 17. We're still in negotiations with the various providers, but anticipate that this increase will be less than 5%. In addition, this budget includes a $300,000 contribution to the Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust, and the funds in this trust are being accumulated to cover the cost of retiree health benefits. Next is the workers' comp fund. The city is self-insured for workers' comp, and we included a 10% increase for fiscal 17 in order to build reserves for projected increases in claims expense. The workers' comp rates had not been increased for 3 years since we did a 50-cent per reduction in rates in fiscal 13. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'll take any questions if anyone has any. If not, the city departments will be out in the lobby to go over their individual budgets in more detail, and you're welcome to join us out there. Oh, Public Works, yeah. Will remain in here. I keep forgetting about you guys.
Good job, man.
Thanks.